I didn't tell anyone what I found. That was my first mistake. Or maybe it was the smartest thing I ever did. Either way, that decision changed everything I thought I knew about the people sleeping under my roof. My name's Robert Chen, and I'm 63 years old. I've spent the last 40 years building a life in Vancouver that most people would call comfortable. My wife Margaret and I raised 2 kids in a house overlooking English Bay. Our son David moved to Toronto years ago, works in finance, calls every Sunday like clockwork. But our daughter Emily, she stayed close. Too close, as it turned out. It was a Tuesday morning in October when I found it. The smoke detector in our bedroom had been chirping for 2 days straight. Margaret kept nagging me about it, so I finally dragged the stepladder out of the garage and climbed up to replace the battery. The moment I twisted the detector off its mount, I knew something was wrong. It was heavier than it should have been. I turned it over in my hands, and that's when I saw it. A tiny lens, no bigger than a pinhead, embedded in the plastic casing, and behind it, a micro SD card slot that definitely wasn't standard equipment. My hands started shaking. I stood there on that ladder for what felt like an hour, but was probably only 30 seconds. Why would anyone need to watch me sleep? Who had access to our bedroom? Who had opportunity? I carefully screwed the detector back into place, climbed down, and put the ladder away. Then I sat on the edge of our bed and tried to think. Margaret was downstairs making breakfast. I could hear her humming along to CBC radio, the same station she'd listened to for 30 years. Emily had stayed over the night before, something she'd been doing more and more lately. She was in the guest room, probably still asleep. Her boyfriend had dumped her 3 months ago, and she'd been coming home to process ever since. I went through the motions that morning, ate my eggs, kissed Margaret goodbye when she left for her shift at the hospital. She's been a nurse at Vancouver General for 26 years, 13 more months until retirement. We had plans, a trip to the Maritimes, maybe sell the house and get something smaller. After she left, I went back upstairs. Emily's door was still closed. I stood in the hallway, staring at that smoke detector, and made a decision that would haunt me for months. I wouldn't rip it out. I wouldn't confront anyone. Not yet. I needed to know who put it there. And more importantly, I needed to know why. I spent that afternoon at a computer repair shop in Burnaby, the kind of place that doesn't ask questions. I told the kid behind the counter I needed a device that could detect wireless signals. He sold me an RF detector, the kind private investigators use. Cost me $400, but I paid cash. That night, after Margaret fell asleep, I swept the entire house. The detector lit up in 6 different locations. The bedroom, obviously, but also the ensuite bathroom, the home office where I managed our investments, the kitchen, the living room, and Margaret's walk-in closet. 6 cameras, in our own home, watching us for God knows how long. I didn't sleep that night. I lay next to my wife of 38 years, staring at the ceiling, listening to her breathe, and wondering if I even knew her anymore. The next morning, I did something I'd never done in 40 years of marriage. I lied. I told Margaret I had a golf game and wouldn't be back until dinner. Instead, I drove to a law firm in downtown Vancouver. Not our regular lawyer, the one who'd handled our wills and the purchase of our rental properties. I needed someone who didn't know us. The lawyer's name was Jennifer Park. She was maybe 35, sharp eyes, an expensive suit. I sat in her office on the 20th floor of some glass tower and told her everything. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair and said, "Mr. Chen, before we go any further, I need to ask you something. Do you have any reason to believe your wife is having an affair?" I'd been married long enough to know that was always the first assumption. Husband finds hidden cameras. Must be the wife's doing. Must be cheating. But I knew Margaret. She was a lot of things, but unfaithful wasn't one of them. "No," I said, "this isn't about an affair." "Then what do you think it's about?" I'd been asking myself that question for 24 hours straight, and I kept coming back to the same answer. "Money," I said. Jennifer nodded slowly. "Tell me about your assets." So I did. The house, paid off, worth about $2.4 million in Vancouver's insane market. The rental properties, 4 units in East Van that we'd bought 20 years ago when you could still afford to invest. Our RRSPs and TFSAs, carefully managed over 4 decades. A small inheritance from my parents, safely invested in blue-chip stocks. All told, Margaret and I were worth about $6 million. Not rich by Vancouver standards, but comfortable enough to retire without worry. And your will? Jennifer asked. Split 50-50 between Margaret and me. If one of us dies, everything goes to the survivor. When we're both gone, it's divided equally between David and Emily. Does Emily know the value of your estate? I thought about that. Emily had always been the artistic one. She'd gone to Emily Carr for graphic design, graduated with debt, never quite found her footing in Vancouver's competitive creative industry. She freelanced, lived paycheck to paycheck, borrowed money from us more often than I like to admit. Last year, she'd asked about an early inheritance. Said she wanted to start her own design studio. I told her no, not yet. You don't give a 32-year-old $500,000 to chase a dream. You make them work for it, like we did. She hadn't taken it well. She knows we're comfortable, I said carefully. Jennifer made a note. Mr. Chen, I'm going to recommend something, and you're not going to like it. Don't remove those cameras. Not yet. Why not? Because right now, you don't know who put them there, or what they're recording. If you remove them, whoever's watching will know you found them. They'll destroy evidence. They'll change tactics. But if you leave them in place and act normal, they'll get sloppy. People always do. She was right. I didn't like it, but I did it anyway. The next 2 weeks were the longest of my life. I went to work at the credit union where I'd been a loan officer for 30 years. I came home and had dinner with Margaret. I helped Emily move some furniture into a new apartment she'd found in Kitsilano. I played my part perfectly, and every night I lay in bed knowing someone was watching me. Jennifer had recommended a private investigator, a guy named Tom Bradshaw who specialized in corporate espionage and domestic surveillance. He came to the house one afternoon when Margaret was at work and Emily was God knows where. Tom was maybe 50, looked like he'd spent time in the military, didn't waste words. He swept the house again with equipment that made my RF detector look like a child's toy. Whoever installed these knew what they were doing, he said, examining the camera in the bedroom. This isn't off-the-shelf stuff. These are professional grade. Wireless, encrypted, cloud storage. Been recording to a server somewhere for... He checked something on a tablet. 8 months. 8 months. I felt sick. Can you trace where the footage is going? Working on it. These things are routing through multiple VPNs, but I'll find it. Question is, what do you want to do when I do? I didn't have an answer for that yet. Tom spent 3 days tracing the digital footprint. When he finally called me with results, I was sitting in my car outside the credit union, on my lunch break. Found it, he said. The footage is uploading to a cloud server registered to a company called Cascade Security Solutions. Ever heard of them? No. That's because they don't exist. It's a shell company, registered 6 months ago to a numbered corporation in Alberta. But I dug deeper. The payment for the cloud storage? It's coming from a bank account in your daughter's name. I sat there in that parking lot, watching people walk by with their coffee and their problems that suddenly seemed so much smaller than mine, and I felt something inside me break. You still there, Mr. Chen? Yeah, I said. I'm here. There's more. I traced the IP addresses of the devices accessing the footage. 3 different devices. One matches your daughter's laptop. One matches a phone registered to a Margaret Chen. And the third... He paused. The third is registered to a law firm. Hutchinson and Associates, downtown Vancouver. That name hit me like a physical blow. Hutchinson and Associates, our family lawyer. The one who'd handled our wills 15 years ago. The one Margaret had insisted we keep using even though their fees kept going up. Mr. Chen, I think you need to come see what else I found. I met Tom at his office in Burnaby that evening. I told Margaret I had a credit union dinner. Another lie. They were getting easier. Tom had printouts spread across his desk, phone records, financial statements, email transcripts from a data recovery service that operated in a legal gray area I decided not to ask about. Your daughter's been in contact with Hutchinson and Associates for 7 months, Tom said, pointing to highlighted entries on a phone bill. Regular calls, always during business hours. And look at this. He slid another document across the desk. An email from Emily's account to someone at the law firm. The subject line made my blood run cold. Dad's mental state documentation. I read the email, then I read it again. Then I had to sit down because my legs wouldn't hold me anymore. Emily was building a case that I was suffering from dementia. The emails detailed alleged incidents. Times I'd supposedly forgotten conversations. Accusations that I was becoming paranoid, irrational, potentially dangerous. She'd even attached photos of pill bottles from our bathroom, prescribed medications for high blood pressure and cholesterol, twisted to look like something more sinister. "There's more," Tom said quietly. "I found drafts of legal documents on a cloud server your wife's phone was accessing, applications for power of attorney, committal papers for psychiatric evaluation. They were planning to have you declared mentally incompetent." The room spun. I gripped the edge of Tom's desk and forced myself to breathe. "Why?" I finally managed. Tom pulled out one more document. "This is a proposed revision to your will, drafted by Hutchinson and Associates 2 months ago. In this version, if you're declared incompetent, your assets transfer to a trust managed by your wife and daughter. They'd have complete control. You'd have nothing." I drove home on autopilot that night. I don't remember the route I took or how long it took me. I just remember pulling into our driveway and seeing lights on in every room of the house I'd worked 40 years to pay for, and wondering how I could have been so blind. Margaret was in the kitchen when I came in. She looked up from her laptop and smiled. The same smile I'd fallen in love with in 1986. The smile I'd woken up to for 13,000 mornings. "How was the dinner?" she asked. "Fine," I said. "Boring. Emily's coming over tomorrow night. I thought we'd make that salmon you like." I nodded and went upstairs. In our bedroom, I stared at the smoke detector. In the morning, I'd replace that battery like I'd promised weeks ago. I'd take the ladder out, climb up, twist the detector free, and I'd act surprised when I found the camera. But that was tomorrow. Tonight, I lay in bed next to my wife, and I started planning. The salmon dinner was on Friday. I spent the 3 days between Tom's revelation and that meal moving money. Not all of it, just enough that it would be noticed if they were watching the accounts, which I now assumed they were. I transferred $200,000 from our joint investment account into a new account at a different bank, under my name only. I moved our rental property deeds into a trust I'd established through Jennifer Park. I changed the passwords on every financial account we had. If Margaret or Emily noticed, they didn't say anything. Friday night arrived. Emily showed up at 6 with a bottle of wine and a smile that made me want to throw up. Margaret cooked the salmon with that dill sauce she'd perfected over the years. We sat at the dining room table, the 3 of us, and I played the role of devoted husband and father one last time. "So, Dad," Emily said, pouring herself a second glass of wine, "how have you been feeling lately? You seem a little off." There it was, the opening move. "I'm fine," I said. "Why do you ask?" "Well, Mom mentioned you've been a bit forgetful. Losing your keys, missing appointments. We're just worried about you." I looked at Margaret. She was carefully cutting her salmon into precise pieces, not meeting my eyes. "I haven't missed any appointments," I said calmly. "Are you sure?" Emily leaned forward, her voice dripping with concern that would have fooled me 2 weeks ago. "Because Mom said you forgot your dental cleaning last month." I didn't have a dental cleaning last month. I'd never missed a dental appointment in my life. "Maybe I did," I said. "Getting old, I guess." Emily exchanged a look with Margaret. I saw it. Quick, meaningful. They thought they had me. "Dad, have you ever thought about? Would you ever consider seeing someone, just to talk? There's no shame in it. Lots of people your age experience memory issues." I set down my fork. "What kind of someone?" "A doctor. Maybe a specialist. Mom and I have been talking, and we think it might be good to get checked out. Just to be safe. Just to build their case. Just to create a paper trail. Just to get me in front of a psychiatrist who could be convinced, with the right evidence, that I was losing my mind." I looked at my daughter. Really looked at her. When had she learned to lie so well? Where had I failed as a father that she could sit across from me and plot to steal everything I'd built? "I'll think about it," I said. The relief on their faces was almost comical. After dinner, Emily helped Margaret clear the table. I heard them whispering in the kitchen, too quiet for me to make out words, but I didn't need to. I knew what they were saying. "It's working. He's agreeing. We're almost there." I excused myself and went upstairs. In the bedroom, I stood under that smoke detector one final time. Tomorrow, I'd end this. But tonight, I wanted them to see me. I wanted whoever was watching those cameras to see a tired old man getting ready for bed, completely unaware that his family was circling like vultures. I slept better that night than I had in weeks. Saturday morning, I woke up early. Margaret was still asleep beside me. I got dressed quietly and went downstairs to make coffee. While it brewed, I sent a text to Jennifer Park. It's time. She'd been preparing for this moment. The evidence Tom had gathered, the financial records I'd secured, the documentation of the camera installation, the email trail, all of it organized into a file that would make any judge's decision very easy. At 9 o'clock, there was a knock on the door. I opened it to find 2 police officers standing on my porch. "Mr. Robert Chen?" the taller one asked. "That's me. We have a warrant to search these premises for illegal surveillance equipment." Margaret appeared at the top of the stairs in her bathrobe. "Robert, what's going on?" I stepped aside to let the officers in. "They're here about the cameras, Margaret. The ones you and Emily installed to make me look crazy." The color drained from her face. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Of course you don't." I looked up at her, this woman I'd loved for nearly 40 years. "Did you know Emily registered the cloud storage in her own name? Did you know she kept emails detailing your whole plan? Or were you counting on me being too far gone to figure it out?" One of the officers was already heading upstairs with a detection device. The other stayed with us in the foyer, hand resting casually on his belt, watching Margaret like she might run. "Robert, please, let me explain." "Explain what?" "How you were going to have me committed. How you were going to take everything I worked for. How you involved our daughter in stealing from her own father." The officer upstairs called down. "Found one. Bedroom smoke detector. Exactly where you said." Margaret's face crumpled. She sank down on the stairs, and for a moment I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. "It was supposed to be for your own good," she whispered. "You're getting older, Robert." We thought. Emily thought. Emily thought she could get her inheritance early, and you helped her because why? Because 40 years of marriage means nothing? Because the house and the money meant more than I did? That's not fair. "No," I said. "What's not fair is being watched in my own home for 8 months. What's not fair is my own wife and daughter trying to convince the world I'm losing my mind." The officers found all 6 cameras within an hour. They bagged them as evidence. While they worked, I called Emily. She didn't answer, but I left a message. "Emily, it's Dad. The police are at the house. They found the cameras. All of them. I know about Hutchinson and Associates. I know about the plan to have me committed. I know about the revised will. I've moved the money. The rental properties are in a trust you can't touch. You and your mother have exactly 24 hours to pack your things and get out of my house. After that, I'm changing the locks. Don't bother coming to the door. Don't bother calling. You made your choice. Now live with it." I hung up. My hand was shaking, but my voice had been steady. Margaret was crying on the stairs. "Robert, please, we can fix this. We can go to counseling. We can. We're done, Margaret. I've already filed for divorce. Jennifer Park will be sending you the papers. You'll get what the law says you deserve, and not a penny more. And that's more generous than you deserve after this." The officer taking my statement was a woman about Emily's age. She looked at me with something like pity. "Mr. Chen, you should know that what they did, the surveillance, the conspiracy, that's all criminal. You could press charges." I thought about that. Thought about my daughter with a criminal record. Thought about Margaret, who'd spent 26 years saving lives at Vancouver General, being arrested at work. "No," I said. "The divorce and the financial consequences are enough. I just want them gone." Emily showed up an hour later. She came in through the front door like she still had a right to be there, face red, eyes swollen from crying. "Dad, I can explain." "No, please, just listen." "No, Emily. I'm done listening. I'm done being understanding. I'm done pretending this is something it's not. You tried to steal from me. You tried to have me locked up. You brought your mother into it and turned my own wife against me. There's nothing to explain. There's nothing to forgive. I needed the money. You don't understand what it's like, struggling in this city, watching everyone else succeed while I'm barely getting by. So you decided to take it? Without earning it? Without even asking?" "I did ask. Last year. And you said no. Because you're 32 years old and you need to build your own life. Like I did. Like your mother and I did. We didn't have anyone handing us millions of dollars. We worked for it." She was sobbing now. Full, ugly sobs that shook her whole body. "I'm your daughter. Doesn't that mean anything?" I looked at her. This person I'd raised and loved and sacrificed for, and I felt nothing but emptiness where my love for her used to be. "It meant everything," I said quietly, "until you decided it meant nothing." Emily moved out that day. Margaret followed 3 days later. The house felt huge and empty without them, but also cleaner somehow, like I could finally breathe. The divorce took 8 months to finalize. Margaret got the house, which I didn't fight for. I didn't want to live there anymore, not with the ghost of what we'd been haunting every room. She got half the liquid assets, which was fair under Canadian law. I kept the rental properties and my retirement accounts. Hutchinson and Associates lost their law license after an investigation by the Law Society of British Columbia. Turns out they'd been running similar scams with 3 other elderly clients. They're facing criminal charges now. Emily tried to reach out 6 months after everything fell apart. A letter arrived at my new apartment in Yaletown, handwritten, full of apologies and regrets. She said she'd been manipulated by Margaret, who'd been manipulated by the lawyers. She said she loved me and wanted to make things right. I read the letter once, then put it in a drawer. Maybe someday I'll respond. Maybe someday I'll be able to look at my daughter without seeing the cameras, without remembering that she watched me sleep for 8 months while planning to take everything. But that day isn't today. David flew out from Toronto when he heard what happened. We had dinner at a steakhouse in Yaletown, and he apologized for being so far away, for not knowing, for not protecting me from his own family. They're not your responsibility, I told him. You built your own life like I wanted. You didn't ask for handouts. You didn't scheme. You did it right. He asked if I was going to change my will. Leave everything to him instead of splitting it with Emily. I thought about that. Part of me wanted to punish Emily even in death. But that felt too much like what Margaret and Emily had tried to do to me, using money as a weapon, using inheritance as control. No, I said. The will stays the same. When I'm gone, you'll both get equal shares. What Emily did was unforgivable, but she's still my daughter, and maybe by then she'll have learned that some things you can't buy, some things you can't steal, some things you have to earn. David nodded. He understood. He always did. It's been a year now since I found that camera. I'm 64 years old, living alone in a modern apartment with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking False Creek. I go to work. I have dinner with David when he's in town. I've even started dating, which feels strange and wrong and sometimes wonderful. The truth is, I miss the daughter I thought I had. I miss the wife I thought I knew. I miss the family dinners and the shared jokes and the comfortable silence of people who've known each other forever. But I don't miss the cameras. I don't miss lying in bed wondering who's watching. I don't miss the fear and the paranoia and the constant second-guessing. I'm sleeping okay now, most nights. Some nights I still wake up at 3 in the morning and check the smoke detectors, just to be sure. The therapist I'm seeing says that's normal. Says it'll fade with time. I hope she's right. People ask me if I regret not confronting them sooner. If I regret playing along for those 2 weeks, knowing I was being watched, gathering evidence instead of just throwing them out. I don't. Because if I'd confronted them the day I found that first camera, they would have denied everything. They would have destroyed the evidence. They would have painted me as paranoid, unstable, exactly what they were trying to prove. Instead, I let them think they were winning. I let them get sloppy. And when the moment came, I had everything I needed to protect myself. That's the thing about betrayal. It teaches you things about yourself you never knew. It shows you how strong you are, how smart, how capable of surviving things you never thought you'd have to survive. I survived this. I'm still here. The cameras are gone. The conspirators are exposed. The money is safe. And me? I'm free. I installed new smoke detectors last month. Real ones. The kind that only detect smoke. I stood on that same stepladder in my new bedroom, screwing them into the ceiling. And I didn't shake. I didn't panic. I just did the job. When I climbed down, I looked at those detectors and thought about calling Emily. Thought about telling her I'd finally replaced those batteries, like Margaret had asked me to over a year ago. Thought about making a joke, breaking the ice, seeing if there was any path back to something resembling a family. But I didn't, because some betrayals are too deep. Some breaks can't be fixed. And sometimes the kindest thing you can do, for yourself and for them, is to let go. So I put the ladder away. I made myself dinner. I sat on my balcony and watched the sun set over the water, turning the sky the color of fire. And for the first time in a year, I felt something like peace. That's my story. That's what happened when I found a camera hidden in my smoke detector and decided to say nothing. When my daughter slipped and revealed a conspiracy that should have destroyed me, but instead set me free. I'm 64 years old. I'm divorced. I'm estranged from half my family. I'm $6 million lighter after legal fees and the settlement. But I'm alive. I'm sane. I'm myself. And some days, that's enough.